I can tell, you're a pretty genuine guy, but you can share with us a little bit about how things really happen in Montana.
Yeah.
So you see where I'm coming from with all that.
Yeah.
You think I'm wrong?
I personally really like limited market.
Show. I'm just kidding.
Limited license markets only. I do not really like, for example, New York or California even, just because I think too many licenses have been given out. It kind of seems like a dumpster fire now.
Surplus, black market.
And what happens in that situation, right, is
Prices
a bunch
plummet.
of companies go under.
Yeah.
But they don't go under. They just move all their stuff to the black market.
Yeah.
That's what you see in California.
Yeah, of course.
So how do you
Same with
address
you.
that?
Right.
You know?
Well, you cut their fingers off.
Yeah.
We are back at MITA Unshackled, MJBizCon 2023. We are now 6 seconds into the show, but I wouldn't know that because the clock hasn't started. MITA Unshackled. We've been through California, we've been through all these great states, and now we are traveling up north to the state of Montana, which I have got to know over the last 10 years, produced some of the great cannabis minds and players in the American cannabis industry mysteriously from whatever was happening up there in the history of Montana. They've been doing stuff up there, and then they migrated out and helped create the Arizona market in 2012. Let's figure out what's going on in Montana, what the current market structure is, and a little bit about the evolution. Let me introduce you to our co-host.
Hey guys, I'm Sergio. I live in Arizona. I work with Dimitri at MITA, and I've been doing cannabis since 2016, working in many markets, but not Montana. So I'm very curious to see, what the history of Montana is, and you definitely piqued my interest.
Yeah, and
I didn't know that.
And you're the perfect person to
I know nothing about
interview
Montana.
them because he's a licensing expert, application expert. How do you get into the market expert in Maryland and a bunch of other states, but he knows nothing about Montana. And he is extremely knowledgeable in the cannabis space, and so am I. So this is why we're doing this, to give people points of contact and a little bit of overview. Let's introduce you guys. Tell a little about yourself.
Yeah, great. Evan Kajander. I own Apogee Gardens. We're based out of Bozeman in Montana. I've been in the business since 2017.
And my name is Jonathan Ballard. I'm our Director of Business Development and Finance for a company called LeafyPack. I got in the cannabis space around 2015 as one of the few direct lenders in this space. So watching it grow has been very exciting with all the changes going on. And I live in Bozeman, Montana, and from there.
Excellent. So, when did Montana go medical?
So that's an interesting question because there have been several iterations of the medical program in Montana.
Yeah.
The latest one started in 2017, and that's when I jumped in.
Right.
But there had been two previous programs that had at some point been killed by the legislature.
I believe it was 2004 was the initial attempt to do medical. And as Evan said, there was a lot of House bills going through that were trying to get it off the ground.
Yeah, aren't there documentaries written about that you can watch about this? I think I saw one.
Anymore there's documentaries on everything, so I wouldn't doubt it. But maybe Evan's seen one of these.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I think I've heard about it, so
You
I
guys
do
have
think
like
it exists.
Like a two-story state house where there's like a balcony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then people can yell and throw shit and stuff.
Yep, that's the capital in Helena.
I think that Google documentary Montana legalization history of, and it will pop up. So we're giving people resources.
If Kevin Costner's in it, then that's the wrong Yellowstone. It's the wrong show.
No, it's really hokey, and it talks about the wars and the DEA and stuff and all this crazy stuff that happened up there.
Yep.
I didn't know anybody of the people, but I remember watching it a long time ago. So Montana is currently still medical.
No, we went rec in 2022, January 1st.
I missed that one.
Yep.
Why didn't you apply for applications up there?
I don't think they have applications.
Well, so it's interesting. There's been a new license moratorium in place since rec started. So if you're a medical provider, you were grandfathered into the rec program, and they've only let a few other people in since then. There's been a moratorium in place, so very few new companies have entered since 2017.
And
how many are there right now?
There's a little over 300 providers.
Okay.
So licensed providers, and that could mean a number. They could just be growers. They could be grower and processor, or grower, processor, and dispensaries.
So they're vertical.
So the medical program required verticality.
Yep.
You had to have your own grow, your own processing, and your own dispensaries. When rec hit, they opened it up. So suddenly people could, focus on what they do best.
Can you process, create a brand, and sell it to the other 300?
You can.
So it is
Yep.
webbed.
Yep.
I like that.
You can.
And like Florida, you can't do that, right? So.
And I think that helps because groups like Apogee Gardens, or shout out a couple others, Top Shelf Botanicals and Lionheart, getting in early like these guys did and pioneering that way helps bring the other people in with a limited population and limited spotlight for us to have resources, whether it's medical use or just resources for our cannabis providers. It's important to have people like Apogee Gardens and Evan and his team to help move that industry forward in a sustainable way.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about you and your business structure and what you do, just before we go back to the
Absolutely.
market.
My background is oil and gas. I spent most of my life working for ExxonMobil, and there's a lot of similarities between oil and gas and cannabis. So when I made this switch over to cannabis, I don't want to say seamless, but I got the basic concept.
I love these Montana guys. You know why? Because it's a red state. Self-starters. They get involved in oil and gas.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Oil, gas, cannabis,
Yeah.
And-
My
and-
mom is in mining, so
Yeah.
she used to live
Sorry
near
about
Glacier
that.
Park.
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
Montana.
Glacier.
Yeah,
Yep.
Glacier.
Beautiful.
He's like an urban core,
No, Mo.
Berkeley hippie, like liberal.
What are you talking about? No.
Sorry.
And
My-
agriculture's been part of Montana. Like
Yeah.
my family comes from wheat farming. Wheat, not to be confused with weed.
Yeah, I was
out of
totally
eastern
coming off
Montana,
there.
it's our largest export, and so agriculture's in the in the roots of the state and the population. So if there's one thing we know how to do, it's growing things.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just admiring you, and I appreciate that. I could feel that Montana spirit in you. Keep going about your business.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot to tell. Basically started off with a small grow, reinvested, and have just grown over the years. It's gotten more competitive.
Right.
As we all know, inflation, labor costs are way up. We're finally seeing some price pressure in Montana, so really focused on healthy margins,
Right.
utilizing technology to reduce labor, but in general, just slowly piecemealing this thing together bit by bit.
What kind of grow do you have? Indoor, greenhouse?
All indoor, about 15,000 square feet, all LED.
What does a pound go for
So,
indoor right now?
On the
Wholesale?
wholesale market,
Yeah.
somewhere between 12 and 16.
And what
That's
was it before?
Arizona prices.
Yeah.
Man, when the program first hit, we were selling $2,500 pounds left and right. So it has gone down.
Are there
Almost
any
like half.
outdoor grows?
There are a few, and they were grandfathered in. And basically, if you didn't have an outdoor grow in medical, you don't get one in rec. So there's a few. Now, there's plenty of greenhouse grows. Those are considered legal as long as they're fully enclosed and not hoop houses.
Yeah.
Right. They have to have like big fences and security
Yep.
cameras and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I want to touch on the technology aspect because I think that's really important. And we're seeing that in newer states as well. But Montana, as new people are entering that market and being in automation and then previously in finance, controlling the margins from day one, expecting that drop in price. You can't throw labor at this problem forever because those prices will never retain it that long. So we were actually discussing our automation systems to be able to, both lower costs, increase throughput, but really margin control.
Yep.
Because none of those prices will ever stay that high. And I think Montana's done a really good job. And, we were talking earlier, you were texting back and forth with the guys from Lionheart, and we're a tight-knit community. And so, we all ships rise at high tide, and we're very close in that state.
What are some of the struggles in growing cannabis in Montana?
Well, obviously regulatory.
Okay.
Right?
The cows are trying to eat the weed.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, not so much.
Is it too cold for the plant?
So,
or how does it-
the biggest thing that we deal with is a lot of regulatory stuff, right? How do you create a level playing field? Enforcement, right? Level enforcement
Right.
across the industry. We know how to grow things when it's really cold in Montana because it's cold there a lot. So I wouldn't say that's an issue. Obviously, we have the same pest problems that we've seen decimate crops on the West Coast, and so we're constantly dealing with IPM programs. But, a lot of good growers. We grow a lot of good weed and marijuana. We really do.
Haven't you
What's-
seen Legends of the Fall?
How
Well, there's
how
a famous
involved
scene
are
where they're growing outside.
How involved are they with your facility? And then also, how difficult is it with the testing for the products once once they're ready to
Great question. We are, so I'm gonna hit testing first. Testing costs are going up.
Okay.
They are adding additional tests basically every session.
Okay.
And so, that's one of the struggles, especially smaller providers are facing.
Right.
I mean, how do we, if 20% of my margin is testing costs, how do I survive, right? On the legislator side, right, there's a disconnect. I think overall, the program in Montana is pretty good. I'm not going to lie. There's a disconnect between the legislature and the Department of Revenue. So this legislature makes, all the laws,
Okay.
and the department has to interpret what they've done and turn that into rules. And that interpretation has been
a challenge.
Challenge, no doubt.
And they're working closer together. There's a lot of work to involve the Department of Revenue even more so because it's still working with DPHHS and all these things. And so there has been a big push because people in Montana also love their cannabis, and I think we all want it to succeed. And so that Department of Revenue coming in and helping with those testing, like any state, there's a lot of lab shopping, trying to push numbers, and it's guys like Apogee and other these good actors that are trying to maintain that course and be advocates for quality testing and regulatory bodies to be a little more involved. I know it's scary for some, but the more regulation that is interpreted in the right way will only benefit the people involved in the industry.
I definitely agree, and I think that's a balance that's hard to strike for a lot of states, right? Like, how do you make the product safe for consumers by enforcing quality control through testing, but then also allow small farmers or guys that are doing smaller batches to also be able to play in the market? And how is Montana handling that? Because in Arizona we only have big grows.
What I'd like to
pretty
see
much.
is, for example, they're putting in required heavy metals testing.
Okay.
Yep.
I think heavy metals should be tested for, but you could do that randomly, so you don't get charged every single time you test, right? And so it's finding that balance that you were talking about between making sure the product's safe, but making sure providers can make a living.
Right.
Yep.
No.
So a little bit more, and testing is a great theme. We haven't really talked too much about, there's so much to talk about with every state
Well,
structure.
testing
Really.
is one of the hardest things, I think, for growers.
I mean, you saw
'cause-
Michigan had such a terrible time when they were starting out. I mean, the labs were shut down. There was
Or Missouri had the
falsifications.
recall
Yep.
recently.
Yep.
It's for
critical.
farm. Imagine you spend all that money and time growing this. You save those plants from all those things that are trying to get at them.
Yeah.
And then you send it off, and then suddenly all that crop is gone just because of some batch.
It's tragic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
We could do a whole series on the nuances
Okay,
of testing
all right,
state
all
by
right.
state.
Yeah.
No, it's a very important aspect of the industry. I'm a little bit more curious, though, about the business opportunities, the business development aspects of it. Where the opportunities lie in Montana for people who are looking in Montana. Obviously, brands want to migrate into Montana.
Yeah.
They need to work through an
Yep.
existing
Yep.
processor. Retailers, it's limited, so there's not like an MSO type,
Yep.
market coming up there. But what about like this adult use licenses being issued in the future? Is that going to happen?
Yeah, so the moratorium goes through July 1st of 2025. So theoretically, starting then, they'll accept new applications. Now there's, we're gearing up for the next legislative session, and there's some discussions about how to roll that out. Because you've seen states like Oklahoma where they just said, if you want a license, you can have it. And it creates a problem from supply and demand perspective. And so, we're talking about things like a lottery system and releasing a certain amount every year and things like that. And so we'll see where the legislature lands. But I think sometime in 2025, you're going to see new companies entering the market.
That's interesting. Why did they do that moratorium in the first place? Was that like a lobbying effort, or was that what was going on there?
Remember,
what's the
we're a
behind
red
the scenes?
we're a red state, right?
Yep.
And so
like that.
the legislature said, hey, we want a couple more years to get a handle on this program and make sure it's rolling out in the right way, and
Right.
also give these Montana-owned businesses a couple more years to develop, and then we'll let in new competition. And so that was the idea behind it.
Again, we take care of our own, and while we're open, Yellowstone Glacier, there's 3 million people a year just visit those places alone, and that's only car numbers. And so when we're looking at how to control that market and how to control Montana, we got to give people the runway to make the right decision, because we saw what just happened in Oklahoma and is currently happening.
Right. Well-
You got to control those licensing systems.
That's subject to a little interpretation. I'm
No,
more of
see,
like
he's
an Adam Smith free market guy.
Yeah.
Let's just follow with me. mostly because I do not like to deny opportunity to those who don't have it.
So this is an interesting segue. In Montana, liquor licensing is done in a similar way that they're proposing doing cannabis licensing,
Right.
which basically says we're going to look at the population of a community and we're going to see how many liquor licenses that community needs, right? And then if those are all given out, if you want to get in, you have to buy an existing license.
Yep.
And so, I think that's a fair way to approach these things. You want a free market. I agree. I'm very pro-capitalism, right? But at the same time, you think about things like liquor and other sin-type drugs,
But
right?
they're wrong. They're wrong. No, but it's a very interesting discussion, and I don't mind when it comes from the fuddy-duddies. I don't mind when people step up and say, I hate fucking cannabis. I'm going to punish these guys by creating less licenses or moratoriums or whatever because I perceive that that's going to hurt them. Okay, that's good. Your heart is in the wrong place, but you're genuine. What bothers for me is like when members of our cannabis industry who claim to support cannabis and the cannabis community and the cannabis culture and the cannabis plant, which has a great tradition of freedom, like this guy, step up and say, hey, you know what, legislators, you should restrict access to it. You should restrict the market. You don't want a dispensary at every corner. And that to me, okay, if that's your agenda and that's who you're going to be that person. But try being a brand who says, try being a retailer who says, you know what, I went to the Capitol to lobby against the expansion of the cannabis industry and the lowering the prices and what's in the best interest of the patrons and consumers. That's what I represent as a brand, whether it's retail or brand. You can't do that. And what they do is they hire lobbyists behind the scenes to manipulate and craft things and to work quietly with the fuddy-duddies. And I've seen it happen all across the United States, local jurisdictions and states. And so that kind of stuff just drives me nuts, and I like to call it out. That's why, you have a little bit of history. And I can tell, you're a pretty genuine guy, but you can share with us a little bit about how things really happen in Montana.
Yeah.
So you see where I'm coming from
I do.
with all that.
Yeah.
You think I'm wrong?
I personally really like
Get
limited
off the
market.
show. I'm just kidding.
Limited license markets only. I do not really like, for example, New York or California even, just because I think too many licenses have been given out. It kind of seems like a dumpster fire now.
Surplus, black
Surplus,
market.
yeah.
And what happens in that situation, right, is
Prices
a bunch
plummet.
of companies go under,
Yeah.
but they don't go under. They just move all their stuff to the black market.
Yeah.
That's what you see in California.
Yeah, of course.
So how do you
That's
Same
true,
with
address
New
too.
York.
that,
Right.
you know?
Well, you
And-
cut their fingers off.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on. Let's use our imagination.
Right,
Civil,
right.
criminal, sanctions,
Because that
capital
product doesn't
punish.
disappear, right? In other industries, that product disappears, but in cannabis is a very specific use case for that, where because there's that surplus and they can move it to the black market.
Yeah.
You're still affecting the price. You're still affecting the businesses that are trying to go through those laws.
Right.
And you can undercut them with probably higher margins right there, while everyone else, like Apogee Gardens and these other people who are trying to, I think, push the industry in a positive direction, are being undercut by that exact capitalism perspective. And that's just my
Let's
take.
talk about it. Are there illegal or illicit grows in Montana?
Of course there
Of
are.
course, but there is way less than
Yeah.
a place like Oklahoma,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
That's true.
I think the population, I think that's something that's really important. And, we're bordered by Wyoming, Idaho, the North and South Dakota. I can't count on my fingers how many of those guys I've seen out here. But in Montana, I mean, we're still just barely over 1 million people in the entire state. Bozeman, Helena, Billings, Missoula, and none of those towns are really breaking over 250,000. Bozeman, 70,000 maybe during the college season. And so there's these high influxes that come in.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I think population does restrict, even with 3 million people coming for Yellowstone a year and 3 million up in Glacier. I mean, you look at a tourist market like Colorado, they got 90 million people a year with visitors.
Yep.
So I think there is a population restriction in Montana, and hopefully we can get these regulations ironed out before it continues to expand, because it is expanding very quickly. It's a popular place to be.
Hey, is there like a really cool Yellowstone dispensary that everybody knows about?
Apogee Gardens.
Is that you? You're the Yellowstone guy. What?
Yeah, we're on the way.
Wow.
All
Yeah.
right. So,
Yeah.
so tagline for this YouTube is, if you're gonna go to Yellowstone, stop at Apogee Gardens.
That's
because
right.
The moose, are there moose in Yellowstone?
Yes, absolutely.
Because
Yep.
the moose, what's the best flower strain you have?
Pink love.
The moose life, love, pink love. That's
There
it.
you go.
Something like
there
that.
you go.
That's
I
the
love
biggest
that.
issue we
I
face
love that.
is moose eating all the cannabis.
Yeah.
Something we deal with every day.
I love that. Why don't we get to the big tourist
So-
attraction in Montana?
What's next legislatively in Montana?
Yeah, so, the topics that are near and dear to me that are coming down the pipe are going to be obviously what happens with testing, what they do with the tiering system, right? Because right now the maximum tier is a 12, and I think that's 30,000 square feet. That's the biggest company in Montana. And there are companies that have hit that level and are ready to go up. The state needs to allow them to keep expanding, I think, and so
Well, you
they're
also
gonna,
want to prepare for interstate commerce.
That's
You
where
don't want your state to be
that's where
restricted.
your point comes in. I think capping that and that disconnect, the translation, not knowing that market from the legislators. That's where I think that the regulations need to be pulled back a little bit. Let these guys grow in a healthy, sustainable way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know what? Is there anything else that you can think of off the top of your head that people should know about the uniqueness of the Montana market? Something that like nobody else. I mean, like the distances, like require this or that.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? The only state I'm aware of that you can drive further to actually deliver a product and they don't have a legal market yet would be Texas.
Yep.
So when I'm on the road, I might make a wholesale sale and I might have to send my driver 8 hours one way.
Yep.
So that's a bit about Montana.
It's a big state.
Logistically, it's challenging.
And so for brands that want to migrate over there, can they reach out to you guys?
Absolutely.
Yep.
We already carry a multi-state brand. We're their sole provider, Loon. And then, I know a number of other companies have signed up, like Wana is in Montana.
Yep.
So it's happening. The brands
awesome.
are starting to find good producers and sign on with us.
What's the tax structure like there, wholesale-wise?
So nothing on the wholesale. It's all taken at the retail level. It's 20% goes to the state, and then the individual county has the option to opt in or out of an additional 3%.
Okay.
It's just similar to Arizona.
Yeah,
Most of them would probably opt in.
most
there-
of them. Yeah.
Medical tax, is there zero for medical tax? Is there?
Again, the county gets to choose whether or not they opt in, and there is a 4% tax for the state.
So all the medical patients have to pay that 20.
No, they pay 4.
Oh, 4.
Plus potentially another 3, depending on the county.
And
they don't have
that
to-
opt-in, opt-out is always
It's little on the medical.
Yeah.
Less of them have opted in. So
Yeah, I like the concept of medical patients paying zero taxes.
I agree.
I agree.
We need to
I
fight
agree.
as an industry to get there.
my fear, and this is the other thing that's probably going to happen in this next session, is that they're going to try and pull away medical because we're a red state. The thing they're seeing is dollars, right?
Yep.
So they want everyone to pay that 20%, which we all agree is not the right answer.
You
No.
know, I'll give you a little bit of a messaging argument, and I grew up very conservative, MAGA, conservative. Anyways, but here's what you tell the people, the fuddy-duddies. You say, look, we need medical. We need a medical with zero taxes. It has to be that way. But we need it to be labeled medical because you want the messaging and the advertising and the communication and the understanding of cannabis to be that it's a medicinal substance, not a recreational substance. So if you got rid of medical, you're going to probably encourage more high school kids to use it. So you want to refer to it as medical. That's the importance of the medical program. And then like the conservatives, the Republicans say, okay, well, that's good. We're trying to start control messaging and stuff. They might take it overboard and start to try to control advertising and stuff, which could be detrimental. But that understanding that messaging helps protect medical. And ultimately, the most important aspect of cannabis is how accessible it is to those people who need it. And those
Most.
are the patients.
Yep.
So I think it's worth, playing that game. And I've been playing that game with a lot of people as I try to educate them about cannabis policy.
looking
But-
at it as accessible health care for people in Montana. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I think House Bill 701 included post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yep.
And so, we're continuing to evolve this. And I think medical, the idea of it got a little bastardized when people were, getting cards just for fun. But now I think the industry has evolved a lot since then. And I think we need to bring it back to say, hey, listen, there are truly medicinal uses for this. This isn't just rec. We can't forget about those people that paved the ground before us.
Well, I came into the industry in 2012 thinking like, hey, this was these hippies figured out a really clever, politically viable way to get high. That was my perspective.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I was wrong. I mean, I prosecuted for 10 years under that mentality. and I didn't understand, medicinal remedies. I didn't understand therapeutical uses of cannabis. I didn't understand patients. I didn't understand the medicine. And as slowly, I took a 3-year journey and came to understand the incredible therapeutical value of not just cannabis, but thousands of other herbal remedies. And we're not educated that way as Western society, conservative fuddy-duddies and all that kind of stuff. But I unraveled, I changed, and I learned a lot in my, I think I was like 30 or something. 40.
Well, and that goes to the point is that this industry changes every year. I mean, from when MJBiz was at the Rio to where we're at now here today, we're ever evolving, ever changing, and it does fall on us to continue to keep that direction moving in a positive and sustainable way, and breaking those old habits and those old mentalities, just like you did. And I think that first part of that is acknowledging your own bias yourself, right?
Yeah, and that's why I kind of consider myself like the first cannabis philosopher, because I came to understand the liberty and freedom that inadvertently became a theme of this plant. Because of Prohibition, we created this movement of people that were just fighting for freedom, in the black market, gray market, just doing their thing. And then the spirit of rebellion, all that kind of stuff got interwoven with the cannabis identity, right? And that's why, because I spent a lot of time reflecting on freedom and how I was a prosecutor, sons of a bitches like me, inadvertently just doing what the legislators told us to do, were denying people freedom. How could we ever do that? The freedom to choose. The importance of that is extraordinary.
The freedom to change.
And, I never internalized it until COVID. And when they started to take freedoms from me, and I said, holy shit. Okay, the most important thing I can do for the rest of my life is advocate for freedom. And you're in this cannabis industry. You're around all these people.
Look at us today.
That should understand, who love the cannabis plant, who can understand that for 50, 60 years, the government just crushed your freedom. You should be bitter. You should distrust government. You should register as a libertarian or Republican. You should try to keep government small. You should understand this. Don't trust dictatorships, apartheids, communists, princes, principalities, democracies, Republicans, Democrats.
All those moose eating all of our weed.
The moose were even against
Where are we going to draw this line?
I think it's interesting.
Sorry,
I agree as
but
well.
they're from Montana. They feel it.
There's
feel
no other
freedom.
industry that
We do
has
feel freedom.
medical and recreational, right? So I mean, imagine if they did this with codeine or with other prescription drugs out there, where they had a medical and recreational. It just wouldn't happen. Right? Only with cannabis.
Thank
so that's
God
what
you
makes
guys have 2 senators.
It's very unique. But I think to your point though is we were all part of that generation. I'm in my late 30s. My family, all of us are in that same age group where it was demonized, and we were towards the tail end of that. But now look at where you're here today. Once you're prosecuting, you look at yourself. Where am I at? Where do I want to stand in this industry? And now look at everyone here today. I mean, it's a completely different outlook.
I remember when in 2012, I was thinking to myself, my family got its first license. It's the reason I got into this industry. 2012. I remember thinking to myself, my God, if I could get into that evidence room and just grab all those bales, just take them, because we don't need to talk about that.
Oh, boy.
You guys are awesome. Montana's awesome. I love you guys. You guys are incredible industry leaders.
Thank you.
Nationwide, obviously, the state of Montana. And Sergio?
Yeah, I learned a lot.
You gonna re-register?
I'm already registered libertarian.
Okay,
so yeah.
Good band.
Well, thank you guys as well.
Yeah, enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, now I really want to visit Montana.
It's a beautiful place to go.
Yeah.
Freedoms and fresh air out there.
I gotta check out Apogee.
Absolutely.
Please do.
What was it? What was the strain that you recommended?
Apogee.
Oh, Pink Love.
Pink Love.
That's
Yellowstone.
Pink Love. That's what I
Take
need to
the
get.
moose. Pink Love.
Yes.
This has been another episode of MITA Unshackled. Thank you, my friends from Montana.
Thanks,
guys.